um, you have the speaker view only, so that way you're not looking at everyone else who doesn't have their camera on. So if you want to set up that feature under view, it's in the top right corner. And if you click on speaker view, you only see the people that are talking, and that helps you a little bit to see see me as I'm talking on the presentation. All right, let me share my screen, and hopefully I do have to apologize. This is not my updated PowerPoint for some reason, technical difficulties. I updated it, but of course, somehow it's lost in the technical universe somewhere. But I added more or less more of online networking than physical. So this PowerPoint sort of I changed. So I'll just sort of talk about it as it goes along. I'm going to do a very quick overview about networking, but I really want everyone to sort of ask me questions so that I can sort of answer some of your concerns. I'd love to hear your success stories or stories that are nightmare stories, I guess, of things that maybe you wanted to, say, oh, did I do something wrong, or should I have done that differently? Sometimes people want that, sort of questions. I did start recording, so that's good. All right.
All good.
I always sometimes forget that. So why don't I'll just start off by introducing myself. As Greg said, my name is Marian Verey. I'm one of the counselors in the Career Development Center, the STAR Career Development Center, but I also manage a spearhead technology leadership development program. So for anyone here who's sort of in that space, if you want to learn more about that tech program, we have 19 students, all interested in a career in technology. So I basically help with making sure that happens, and it's a year-long program that students are sort of part of, that they have to be admitted for. So if you happen to be in a company and you work in that space, feel free to outreach to me afterwards. I'd love to sort of work with you on that too as well. In addition to, for me, it's sort of my experience, I've always generally worked in career services. I started working here at Baruch about 9 years ago. And before that, I've worked at several other universities. I've also gotten a chance to be a recruiter. I worked as an IT recruiter. I've worked as a diversity manager for various corporations. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are basically sort of my perspective on how to network. Not necessarily into a full-time job, just maybe transitioning to a different job, wherever it would, depending on what everyone's situation is. But for me, every job that I've gotten, except for the first one where, you sort of have to I had to fax my resume. This is 20 years ago. Everything has always been sort of a smooth transition. And I find because I have a strong network, a professional network that has helped me sort of transition a lot more smoother from one opportunity to another. So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about, how to make that happen for everyone. And then please ask questions along the way. I'll try to ask questions based on what we're talking about in the slide. And at the end, I'll give you plenty of time to ask me general questions that might not be in the slide, or just questions that might be applicable to your situation. Okay, so thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Greg, for the introduction, and thank you for helping me organize this program. So I've done my coffee now. I feel like I need some boost. So what is networking? Those are the things that we're going to talk about. Sometimes people don't quite get, what does that mean? And we're also going to talk about informational interviewing, how that happens, what it is. We're talking about events that you could possibly go to, at Baruch or outside. Talk about some of the things why people don't do more networking, because networking is really, really important. Whether you're not sure if you're going to transition to a new job, or if you're looking for a new role, networking really should be part of your strategy when you're looking for any type of transition. We'll talk about social media and so forth. We'll talk about your elevator pitch, so that when you're talking with someone to network with, what is it that they're expecting to hear from you? And then lastly, we'll talk about the Baruch network, what that's about, and it is a wonderful, obviously, network to be part of. It's a huge network. It's very global, so it's really a very important network to tap into. All right. So the definition, basically, for me, networking is just basically connecting with people on a professional level, not because you want to use them, but you want an opportunity to be able to, you don't know when you'll need them. So you need to start creating these circles around you so that you can tap into it if you need to, depending on what transition you're going through. Okay. So for the most part, that's sort of what it is. We're not going to do this exercise just for time's sake, something I thought we can do, but it probably wouldn't make sense. So most people find their jobs through networking, right? It's a very high percentage. People always argue it's about 50 to 70% success rate. And Lindsay Pollack has been doing a lot of research around networking. She's a friend of Star, she's a friend of Baruch, but she's also, she's an author and she's written a couple of books. So she's always, this is sort of her area of expertise. But really the statistics has always been high that, it's always around 50 to 70%. People even quote higher than that. But really it's important to understand that this should be where you should spend most of your time, no matter what situation you're in, networking, because it is what people call the hidden job market. So what that means is that the big corporations like the JP Morgan Chase, the Amazons, the Googles, those type of companies need to post all the time. They have to legally and all that stuff. The medium and the small size companies tend not to post as much, and they really place more opportunities either through like third parties or through like their networks, the individual networks. And those medium to small companies make up 2/3 of the workforce. So when we hear Google, we hear Amazon, we hear Goldman Sachs, we think that they make up 2/3 of the workforce. That's sort of what people think about. But really it's the other way around. So really if you do a good job of networking and understanding what's out there, you're really sort of exposed to a lot of these opportunities that you weren't aware of. And a lot of times there are so many, even I sometimes, and I'm not aware of the companies that are pretty good size because they're just new companies always coming up. And there are new companies, smaller companies that I'm not aware of that do great things. So it's really important to beef up your network so that you have access or knowledge about all these different opportunities that might be available to you. So let me just see. Okay. So I guess maybe here I can get some feedback. What are some, besides from this, these are some of the fears that I hear from people when they're trying to be like, well, when I follow up with people, when I meet with students or alumni, I'll say, well, what stopped you from networking? Why didn't you? We talked about networking. You did the workshop. What is it that stopped you from doing it? So what are some, maybe in the chat, if people want to type in things that maybe you sort of are fearful of when you're networking? Let me just read some of that. Anxiety, for sure. A lot of people sometimes say, well, I feel like I'm pushing them. I'm being a little too confrontational, too aggressive. That's also very common. Anyone else want to type anything in there? Sometimes it's a language barrier that sometimes people have. Definitely the lack of confidence. I feel like what do I have to offer them? I feel like I'm just asking them for things and I'm not giving anything back. So people sometimes feel the reciprocity of the process has to be the same. Like, so what they're giving me has to be exactly what I'm giving them. It doesn't always have to be that way because you just don't know what it is that you're giving back to them. A lot of people, when they are open for networking, they're doing it to help people, and that's why they're doing it, but that's important to think about, that it doesn't always have to be what you're giving them has to be equally with what they're giving you. Assuming, let me just read some of the things here. It says, assuming people have enough on their plate to have time. Absolutely. So it feels like it's a burden, like you're kind of getting in the way, especially nowadays. So definitely that's one thing. Lack of topics to talk about. Great. So we'll talk about things that talk about in these networking events. So that's good. Don't want it to be obvious, but absolutely. One of the things we're going to talk about, you should never ask for a job, even if you needed a job yesterday. That's really important. And so, great. We'll move along. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. All right, let's see. So has anyone ever done an informational interview? I don't know if you want to raise your hand or just you want to talk. Anita, do you mind talking about your experience before I go into the topic? Okay, if you want to unmute yourself and talk, that'd be great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, actually, I've gone on, well, not in person, but via Zoom. I've done informational interviews, and basically just getting to know information about the company
Mm-hmm.
and how they work and, you know, what kind of people they look for.
Great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And how was that? How did that feel for you? Was it comfortable or was it a little awkward? Because it's
No, it
via
was
Zoom.
comfortable. I've done it before.
Okay. And this is a person you don't know. It's like a cold connection.
Yeah, this was someone I had actually met through LinkedIn.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Well, I hope that works out even more, in the future. So, um,
Yeah.
absolutely. You just hit on the topic. LinkedIn is we're going to get into that in a little bit, but LinkedIn is a great resource for that. Absolutely. A lot of some of the when I'm running this tech leadership program, a couple of people that's from there are, people that I connected with through LinkedIn. And that's been very useful. I was able to connect with other Baruch alums or other alums where I went to college and so forth. So that was really good. And so LinkedIn is definitely a very powerful tool. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Before I move on into informational interview, someone has asked, is it okay if your current boss knows you are looking for a job? Absolutely not, unless your boss is a really, really, really close friend. Like that would be the only time. Like he or she knows that you are ready to move. But for the most part, that is something that you really shouldn't let your employer know. You just don't know if they want to work on replacing you now while you're looking, which means that you might be let go before you're even time to go. So that's why one reason they might act very aggressively and find reasons for employment. So to me, like definitely when you are job searching, it's okay to be networking. It's okay to be present in LinkedIn. That doesn't mean you're looking for an opportunity. That is a very typical thing that people are doing. So don't assume that because you have a LinkedIn profile, this is one of the fears with LinkedIn profiles. We're not going to go into that today really in details, but a lot of people don't want to put a LinkedIn profile because they feel like their boss will think they're looking for a job. Definitely that's not true. That's definitely a fear that a lot of people have, but I would say that that's not true. Definitely it's okay to have a LinkedIn profile and it's okay to be networking while you have a job. Okay. And usually when you're at work, especially if it's a big company, especially if they have like an employee resource group, that's a fantastic place to be networking. Or if they have any volunteer events that they have, any type of events that they have where it could be a professional development workshop or something like that. Those are places that, you could easily find networking, a place that you could be networking internally. Okay. But you can definitely network outside. So someone said, so I have to network outside, but I gave you, depending on the size of the company, there are plenty of opportunities to network inside. Okay, so all right, so let's move on. Hopefully I answered your question, Claudia. If not, please type in some more question. I can address it in a little bit. So informational interviews, just like Anita says, it's been very useful for her. I've heard tons and tons of successful stories through LinkedIn. So really, if you don't have a network, if one of professional says, if you're not a Rockefeller, meaning you have all these connections, you better figure out a way where you can find these people to network with. And LinkedIn and other professional associations will be a great place for that. And when you find those individuals that you don't know, you can set up what they call an informational interview. It's an interview where you become the interviewer and you sort of lead the conversation, but it is not for a job. And normally an informational interview is what it says, it's for information. And the information could be about the person's career paths and what they do, or it could be information about the organization that they work for, or information that sort of intrigues in what profile they have that you found about online. So those are some of the things that you generally ask in an informational interview. And I say 20 to 30, but when I updated in the previous slide, but I didn't update here. But typically I would say when you're asking for an informational interview, you want to say that you're looking to speak to them for about 15 to 20 minutes. And you're hoping that because you're engaging and you're able to have a conversation, that they'll probably stay up a little longer. But if you say 20 to 30 minutes, it seems too long to commit to. But if you say 15 to 20 minutes, a lot of people feel like they have 15 minutes that they can spare. So I always say when you're asking for an informational interview that you don't know, aim at 15 to 20. And that's a first conversation conversation. That's not, hopefully not the last. So you're aiming at just building rapport with a person. And you could really do that in 15 to 20 minutes. And almost always, if it's a person that you don't know that well, they just want to sort of have touch base with you just to see, to make sure you're not weird, you're not awkward, and it's someone that, because they don't know you. So they're going to find you on Zoom. They feel a little more confident that you're okay to have a connection with, and sort of build on the informational interview. So I aim at the first conversation, the first time you meet, whether it's Zoom or over the phone or in person. It's more about just building rapport. It's not about like, I need a job yesterday. Can you hook me up with a job? So your goal in your first meeting is really just rapport building. And rapport building is getting to know the person and what they do. And people always say like people like to talk about themselves. So your goal is to try to ask them questions about themselves, but you should be asking professional questions like their career paths. How did they choose what they studied and the industry that they decided to break into? Something that shows interest in their career and anything sort of interest in why they work where they work. You should not ask sort of intrusive questions like, salary, because that is something that you sort of have to build a little more relationship before you talk about salary, because a lot of people are sensitive around salary. Things like politics are things that we shouldn't be talking about in these interviews. Religion, any other topics that sometimes people don't know should be sort of hot topics that not to be talked about. But generally, politics and religion are two main things, and salary. Okay, all right. So, but nowadays, of course, most of our information interviews are via Zoom or via Teams. So it's always online nowadays. So for me, definitely okay. I've heard many success stories via online. I mean, we had Skype. Skype is still around, but before Zoom, Skype was the #1 place, and it became sort of like Viber and other, Facebook Live and all that stuff. But now really Zoom and Teams are the two more popular sort of platform for virtual meetings. And I guess Google Hangout too nowadays. Okay, all right. So, like I talked about, gathering information, building relationship. That's the #1 fault that people, when I talk to people about informational interviews and why it didn't work, what I always find is they jump into asking for a job. Never give that sort of scent that you're looking for a job. Really what you want to give the essence of that tone is that you're looking for information. You're gathering information. So that's sort of what you should, if they say, oh, where are you now? Like if that conversation goes, you need to talk about you're in transition and you're looking for your next step, but you're not really asking for a job. But hopefully that person, depending if you're able to build that rapport, can say, oh, have you thought about working here? And then that's where the conversation can then be said, yes, I would love to have that opportunity. One of my goals for meeting you is to find out how you got to this place today. But that's still not asking for a job. You're asking about how they got to where they are today. So really your goal, even though they might push you that way, is to try to play that little dance that you're not like asking for a job, but you're sort of hinting at it. More than anything, it's more subtle than that. I know it's a little hard when people are at that situation where they're like, man, I just got laid off, or I just quit my job, and you need a job. Sometimes you can't help it, but do your best, because a lot of people don't feel like when you just meet someone, then they feel like, now I got to find that pressure to find you a job where they're working is sort of intense for most people, and they don't appreciate that. So here's a typical sort of something that you would send to someone if you were, it's a cold connection. You don't know this person, but you found them somewhere. This is a warm connection would be like you met them at an event. You were introduced by someone. There's some form of connection. A cold connection is like you just totally have no connection with them. You randomly found them. You found them online with no connection. That's what I would consider a cold connection. A warm connection is somehow you went to Baruch together, you're part of the Baruch College network. Somehow there's some connection in that way. That would be some form of warm connection. So depending on how you write that, you would, this is just an example of what a student would write. It would be different based on if you're more seasoned. You will talk about more about your transitioning into you're looking to transition into something different, and that you notice that they do this type of work, and you're looking to learn more about sort of their area of expertise. So for example, let's say I am a software engineer, but I'm looking to be a data scientist. I decided, oh, you know what? I'm tired of being a software engineer. I want to be a data scientist. So maybe I would set up I might email someone says, I'm currently a software engineer doing X, Y, and Z. I noticed you're a data scientist at so I would love to hear about, what you do as a data scientist and the type of projects you work on. That's something that I'm sort of looking to get more information about, something like that. And then so that's the type of email that I might write to someone, or type of email type of invitation in LinkedIn that I might type. And in LinkedIn, you're limited to the number of characters if you don't know a person. And I think it's like 300 characters or something like that. Very short, so you can't explain too much. So your email has to be straight to the point, and that's important to write it that way because people will not write long emails, will not read long emails. So it's really important for your emails to be streamlined nowadays. Okay. Any questions on like how to write to someone you don't know, like what you should put in an email? Hopefully I gave you some basic guidelines. Does the informational interview have to be for a job that you could fulfill now, or can you do an informational to research a career role that you may have down the road after more advanced training? Absolutely, absolutely. So an informational interview is for information for what you need, for when you need it. So definitely there's no timeline. That timeline is created by you. So if you feel like, you know what, my goal is in 2 years, I'm going to transition into X, Y, and Z, and I want to prepare now for what I need because I might need a certain type of skills. So I don't want to just find out 2 years later that I needed A, B, and C when I could have been working on that towards that in 2 years. So absolutely, it doesn't have to be something you need now. And with networking, that's the thing that people don't do is like, they don't network when they don't need it. People start networking when they need it. And by then, unfortunately, it's too late because it takes time to develop relationship with people you don't know. And that's when we're talking about network, we're talking about people you don't know today, because with people hopefully you come to a point where you can ask them for things. So the ones we're talking about are the ones that you sort of don't know for the most part. And so absolutely, you can definitely ask, because hopefully people are creating goals for themselves and realizing what they need. That's true for like technology, let's say. I wanted to be a software engineer yesterday. Well, if you don't have the set skills, chances of you being a software engineer, it's not going to happen unless you do it. You learn and you meet with someone what software, what programming languages nowadays are important. Because if you're still learning Pascal, chances are you probably won't get a job in software engineer. So what are the right, here's another question from David. What are the right words to say in LinkedIn when you find someone you'd like to network with without going over the 300 characters? Your goal is to just give them in a short period of time, introducing who you generally are, what you want, why you're connecting with them, and that's all you need to, hopefully that will be enough to get them to say, sure, I'll have a quick conversation with you. So really your goal is not to say, I can do this, I can do that, I know this, I know that. That's not your goal. Your goal is like, I'm currently here, I'm looking to learn about this because you're saying something about their background that you want to learn about, and then you tell them how you'd like to connect. Like, I'd like to connect over the phone, or we can dialogue over email. I just had some questions about your current role or your career path and how you get to where you are. But so your goal is not to tell them all the things that you can do. Your goal is to just say, introduce yourself briefly, what you're looking for, and then suggest how to connect with each other. And that's it. And you're hoping that they will say, yes, I'd love to, let's chat over email. for now, and let's go from there. They might say something like, it's like, oh, why don't we hop on a call? Give me a call tomorrow. They might do that. That's a more typical answer. It's like, why don't you give me a call tomorrow? What is one thing which is a conversational starter if you want to create a strong connection with a formal person? I'm assuming this is after you've connected on LinkedIn and now you've agreed to meet in person. I assume that that's the question. If that's the case, for me, it's about getting to know them and talking about current events. For now, what's the current event? It's the pandemic. So if you do meet in person and that's the situation, and hopefully you guys are both masked up, you could say, how are you doing? How's your family? You would ask more questions like that. How has the pandemic affected you? Things like that. You might talk more about that kind rather than jumping into, oh, what do you do there? How long have you been there? Things like that. So you do want to start with getting to know them, like how are they doing? How are you dealing with the pandemic and things like that. So I would start with that type of conversation more. And that's, just to warm each other up. And even if that takes 20 minutes, you do 20 minutes of that. Each person is different how long it takes. Because I mentioned earlier, the first conversation, the first meeting, wherever that's going to take place, whether it's over the phone, over Zoom, or in person, is about building relationship, building rapport. Don't think that you're going to get everything you need in one situation, one meeting. So your goal in a first meeting is just rapport building. The more you can build that connection right away, the better your chances of having this person recommend you for an opportunity. So, let me know if Trishla, if that answered your question or not. I wasn't sure where this question took place, if it's before your meeting or after. So, okay, great, thank you. All right, so these are some other tips basically, but it really is focus on make sure that after you meet with the person, make sure that you don't just jump into what you need from them right away. Just focus on that rapport building. That's so important. And don't just give them your resume. That's also the typical error that a lot of people is that they'll bring their resume. It's like, here, take a look. I need you, you want to always, don't do those type of things. Those are sort of rapport zappers, I guess is what you want to call it, where people feel like it's a little too confrontational, too aggressive. So be mindful of that. So people say, how do I get started? Especially like if it's hopefully we'll all eventually go in person and be able to interact in person one of these days. And so this is more for that type of networking events, like how to people have a hard time. When I've organized networking events, I find like the people who need to be networked are always on one side, and the professionals or the ones you want to network are on the other side. So you see that people find it very uncomfortable to have this type of, and I find this anxiety, this sort of fear in every level of people. It's not just for students or first year graduates. I find this with even seasoned people, because it's always like, once I'm ready to transition, there's that fear that you have nothing to offer someone, even though you might have all these years of experience. So for me, like, one I find helpful for a lot of people is the buddy system. So if you're at a networking event, go with someone until you feel more comfortable by yourself, and then sort of go together to a person. I find like a lot of people find that easier. And I find like if you go with another person, you have to go somewhere with someone, and so you're less likely to sort of back out. Because I also hear people who register for something and then they back out to the last minute because of just not knowing if they're going to meet someone or not. So that's one thing that would be a good trick for a lot of people, is don't go there alone and try to have a person that you can go with. It's always best if there is a topic to the presentation or the event, so that at least you could sort of talk about whatever it is that you're there for together. So if there's something that there's a common goal for whatever, it could be, if it might be a cultural event or something like that. The Baruch College alumni has an event around LGBT, because October is sort of coming out month. So they're doing something around LGBT. So if you were going there and you're networking, and it's for LGBT and their allies, so it's for everybody. But that might be a common goal that people can go to. And so that conversation's a little easier, because then when you start the conversation, it's about sort of what you're there for, the topic that you're sort of there for. So that makes it a little easier. I always say when you have food involved, just make sure that you don't have your hand full. So this is more in person. You know, you don't have a food plate in one and a drink in another hand, and you can't shake hands or something. Hopefully we can all shake hands one of these days again. But those things are sort of like little things to be mindful of, that people start to get nervous because they're like, now I don't know what to do. Because I have food and a drink in my hand, now I don't know how to shake this person's hand. So those are tiny little things that somehow makes a big difference, especially when your networking is not something you like to do. So there are different events you can definitely, we talk about this already, but definitely stay away from personal life, that politics and religion. Oh, someone said something got cut out. Part of your slide is cut out. I don't know. Does anyone else see? I don't see anything cut out. Does anyone else see anything cut out?
It looks okay to me, Marian.
Yeah.
Marian, I think it might be maybe just the way it's displaying on their screen.
Oh, okay.
Maybe they're in full screen or something.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. We will share the slide later, right? I can't remember if we have that chance to do that, but
yes, we'll follow up with an email with the recording as well as other materials.
Okay, perfect. And then when you do the recording, you might not have the chat, and I don't know if you have the people on your right side. Those won't show up. It'll just show up on the screen.
Right.
Yeah. So hopefully that will solve that problem, Anita. Oh, the other thing, this is funny because I have a person that it's not seasoned, but maybe like 4 years out, that I was working with, and he was networking, and he was saying like, I don't get, like, some people, we hit it off, it seems like, but then towards the end it gets a little like awkward. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't know, you know me, I try to soften the tone and try to tell jokes, and I said, okay, well, and then of course when I hear the jokes, I realize that someone might not take that the right way, but in him, he just felt like he felt so comfortable with the person that maybe he kind of crossed that gray area where the joke might not be so appropriate if you don't know a person. So be mindful of jokes. So for me, don't even go there, because you just never know who's going to take offense to it or take it the wrong way, because they don't know you. So when you're with your friends, you can do those jokes because they get you and you don't mean it that way. But with people you don't know, it might be, it becomes too gray and really not probably appropriate. Okay. Sometimes people mimic language, like they know like that environment, like front office finance might sometimes have a lot of inappropriate language. It doesn't mean that you think that that's that type of environment, that's what the environment, it doesn't mean like when you're trying to network with someone and that's the right place to do it at all. But no matter how well you know that environment, it's best when you're networking not to do that. All right, so these are some of the things. Never, obviously not drinking. No one hopefully has that issue. Checking your phones, texting, all that stuff. Hopefully, things that you wouldn't do in an interview, I guess, you should not do in a networking event. So I would say anytime you're networking with a professional, treat it like an interview, especially with the networking, because you want this to be a follow-up conversation wherever you met the person. So I think it's best to really focus on, making sure that treat it like an actual interview, that hopefully it will lead into a job. And, if you treat it that way, then you'll take it a lot more, no matter how casual the person is, in your mind that you're being interviewed to some degree. So, all right, so here's some general website that you can definitely, LinkedIn is definitely the priority. A lot of companies now, or have profiles in Facebook. So that's another place for you to sort of follow them and look at what they're doing. But just make sure for yourself, if you're networking or looking to transition to a new role or whatever your situation is, just make sure your social media is all cleaned up. Google yourself, see how people can find you. What will they find if they Google you? Bing you, Google you. Make sure that you're not, putting anything inappropriate out there. So this is always the sort of the gray area, because people say, well, I want to be me, I want to do what I want to do, and so forth. Absolutely, that's your right to do that, but it's also in the right of the employer to decide if they want to take you as a candidate or seriously based on what they find. So whatever you put out there, just be ready to know that it might be used against you for, you know, recruiting or any professional things, and that's important. And it, you know, whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't really matter, because employers are using it. So, you know, whether you like it or not, it's going to be used against you. There's a question here from Alejandra. Is it preferable to give personal cards versus official business cards, or does it matter? Definitely more of an official card. Of course, if you're not working, then you give a personal card, meaning there are different variations of it, but you basically create a business card for yourself. But you know, it wouldn't be, it would be more professional, and you should put your LinkedIn link on the back of it. You can even put your QR code on it. So QR codes are having a comeback. So QR codes are, you know, something you can put on your business cards too. But if you have an official business card, absolutely, that's a little more official than having your personal card. So if you had that option, I would definitely do a business card. Yeah, absolutely. If you have a business, meaning like you are working somewhere and you have a business card, absolutely. It's not, you know, everyone now what you can do is have a business. If you don't want, they're really cheap nowadays to make 500 cards. But for me, LinkedIn is always the best. Everyone is almost a lot of more seasoned professionals are on LinkedIn, and that's how LinkedIn was created, was more for seasoned professionals. So if you have a QR code, you can just always find them on LinkedIn that way. So they can just scan it with their phone, and then they could add you in LinkedIn sort of very quickly that way. The other place is Handshake. I don't know if people know about Handshake, but Handshake is like, I don't know how to explain it. It's not really, it's almost like a job database, but for everyone. So it's like, not a job, it's like an OCR workshop, OCR sort of platforms. So schools have what they call on-campus recruiting, right? So that's sort of mostly what students will do to get a job, whether it's an internship or full-time. Handshake has that for students, but it's also open to the public. So there are companies, there could be Harvard, let's say, who's in Handshake and says, well, we have this part of Handshake that's for our students, but then this part of Handshake is for everyone else. So that's another place that you could sort of be present in. It's sort of in between a social media and a job database. So I'm trying to figure out how to explain it better. It's like a mix. It's becoming more towards social media, but it's something that you can sort of add onto your list of places to check out. But definitely for technologists, for people who are in tech, personal website and GitHub is definitely important. So if you don't have a GitHub account and you're in the tech space, you should create one. So that's something that I added but wasn't on this slide. How about, let me ask answer another question. What about networking with entrepreneurs? I am an aspiring absolutely. I mean, you know, do you have a specific question about that, Katie? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. How do you get Handshake? So Katie, if you want to add more content to your question, for David, you just go to, I said handshake.com, I think is the website. Google Handshake, and then you have to create a profile there. The name of the website is Handshake. It could be handshakesomething.com, but I think it's Handshake. Okay, so maybe Katie will come back, but basically you should network with anyone. That's what networking is for. It's for things that you don't have access to right now. Because if I'm looking to be an accountant and my whole family, all my relatives and friends are accountants, I have that already. So I don't need to be networking outside my circle because I have this. So when I'm talking about networking here, it's about things that you don't have access to. So if you are a pharmacist, but now you're looking to be a data scientist, you know, you might not have this data scientist people to talk to about that. Then that's where networking is so key, so you can get those people around you. But if you already have people around you, then you're already networking because those people are already around you. So hopefully that makes a little sense. This is just a little sign, like, basically why it's important to be mindful of your social media when you're networking or looking for a role. So on campus, I know this, people's like, well, I'm a graduate, why would I do this career fair? Well, for me, if you are working, a place to be networking is going to a career fair. Like when I used to attend career fair as an employer, I would talk to everyone around there, before we set up, you're talking to all the other recruiters. So that's one place if you have that chance, because a lot of companies, if they do career fairs, they're always looking for representatives outside the HR department. So if that's something that you're not doing, you might also volunteer to do more things on campus. And things on campus are career days, information sessions. So for me, if you're a Baruch graduate and you are working somewhere and you do go to Baruch, contact your HR department, let them know that you are interested in sort of coming on campus for whatever events that they might come on campus for. So that's why I put it up there. We have tons of student clubs, professional organizations that hold tons of events on campus where there's tons of professionals that come. Not only you as one person, but a bunch of different events. So that's another opportunity where you could really network with other professionals. So don't feel like, coming on campus is about helping students. It could also be helping you because you are tapping into other people that's going to be present there. So that's why I put on campus stuff in here. Now off campus, there are tons of professional association. So make sure that, if you are in a certain field, you should tap into the professional association that you're in the industry that you're part of. Meetup groups. Has anyone ever done Meetup? I don't know if people are familiar. Are people not familiar with Meetup? So the website is meetup.com. There are almost every kind of groups you can think of. It is a great. Sorry, I'll answer that question. It's a great. It's a great place to meet people who have a common interest. So it could be like people who love basket weaving in New York City group. It could be that, that could be one group. That could be me. I'm making that up. I don't know if it's in there, but it could be like a soccer group. That's definitely in there. Like a soccer, let's play on Saturday group. So the meetup is really, and they also have professional groups. They could be like networking with investor relations people. There could be a group on that. There is a group on that. So things like that, there could be a professional group. It could be a fun group. These fun groups are just as great at networking, like I'm part of a tennis group. I play tennis. I meet so many people from different industries in there. And for me as a career counselor, I'm always curious about what people do. So that's sort of a topic that if I meet someone, that's a type of conversation that I usually ask people. Not right off the bat, obviously, but until I get to know them. But that's always of interest to me. Alumni clubs for sure. So there's tons of alumni clubs. LinkedIn has tons of groups. So if you're not part of LinkedIn, you can definitely join the LinkedIn Baruch group, but there's also the alumni relations group. And there's, I think, several other Baruch College groups in there in LinkedIn, but LinkedIn, definitely the Baruch College group and the alumni relations groups are just two places that you should really be part of. So Greg wrote in a Handshake is compatible with alumni. I can double check on how you can join and provide it on our follow-up email. Absolutely. For graduate students, they already use Handshake, so that's easy. We don't use it for undergraduate. For the graduate career services, they use Handshake. So that's something if you got your graduate degree at Baruch, you already have access to that through them. So, but for undergraduate, we use Simplicity, which is, we call it Star Search, but it's powered by Simplicity. Sure, if you don't mind, so far I've tried to sign up for him, but you don't need to be an EDU email, so I don't think it's, well, you can definitely, you have access to your Baruch email for life. You just have to make sure you activate it. If you haven't been using it for some time, you just have to call the help desk and let them know, and then they probably need some certain information from you to reactivate your Baruch email. So then you'll have that EDU account. Okay, so, but yeah, you have access to Baruch, your Baruch email for life, and it's free. So that's a good way to get your EDU email. Okay, so Katie was able to do a follow-up. I need specific guidance and instruction in navigating as a business owner and need a genuine connection, not superficial. Any tips? Well, one of the places that does a lot of entrepreneur workshops and events is actually the Brooklyn Public Library. So the Brooklyn Public Library, if you look under their events section, they have tons of events for entrepreneurs. So that, I think Katie just got in, but Katie, I'm gonna repeat what I said because I think you just got back into the room again. The Brooklyn Public Library has tons of events for entrepreneurs. They work with the small business, I forgot the name of the department in New York City, small business department within New York City that helps people who have small businesses. They have tons of workshops about finance, anything that you really need to start your own business. So that might be a good place to start. And they do have sort of entrepreneur events. So that might be a great way to sort of be around people. And then meetup.com has entrepreneur meetup groups too. So that might be two places you can check out. All right. Do you need a special email for Handshake? You do need the .edu. Again, you have access to that for life. So you just go through help desk and ask them how to activate it, what information they need from you. Yeah, the email, I don't set that up, but it is through, help desk, IT. Greg, I don't know if you can look up the number for people to call to get their email address.
Yeah, I can also provide that information in our follow-up. It's Baruch's ECTC office, which is the technology center, and you can reach out to them to get your email reinstated. It's one of those things where you have it after you graduate, but then if you don't use it for a while, it can go dark. So they can just reinstate that for you. And I'll double check on all this and provide info in the follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, the Graduate Career Services Office, the Graduate Business Career Services Office has Handshake. That I know for sure. So if you got your MBA here at Baruch, then you have access to Handshake. All right, but I work at STAR. We service all the undergraduate and undergraduate alumni only, and we're just in the process of thinking about it. Sorry. All right. Let me move on. So the elevator pitch. I also changed this. The 60 seconds is really long. So I really think that when you're thinking about your elevator pitch, it really should be targeted 30 to 45 seconds at most. And you can see that in 45 seconds, you can say a lot. And the idea that where the elevator speech came from is basically think about you're in an elevator with someone, and then you're going from one floor to another. You only have seconds really to have this sort of build relationship with someone in a short period of time. So you really don't want to just sort of jump in there and dump everything and talk really fast. So just talk, something that you should talk in your normal voice and just mention, practice what about you. And depending where you are, if you're more of an entry level, recent graduate up to 3 years, that type of level, you can talk more about academic background to your professional background. So depending where you are and depending on your history and your resume, focus on your academic. The more seasoned you are, that's applicable to whoever's in front of you, then you focus a lot more on your professional background rather than your academic. And then talk about other things that might make sense. So that within that 30 to 45 seconds, depending where you are, you would focus a lot more on your professional versus your academic, okay? But if it is like, let's say you're at a networking event, like at a networking function, let's say, and it's not like a panel or a career fair or something like that, you don't do that 30 to 45 seconds. It's a lot more like, your name, comment about the event, and then asking where they are, like, oh, are they currently working or not, depending on the event. So for me, like if it's more of a cocktail-like event, you don't jump into your 30 to 45 second speech that you would do at a formal networking event. So that's a little different in that sense. So you do need to tweak your elevator speech depending where you are. Okay. Does anyone want to share an elevator speech that we can all hear? Anyone comfortable to do that? I don't want to put anyone in the spot, but if you happen to be comfortable, we can sort of maybe give you some feedback if you want. I never get anybody that wants to do this, so. But it's, anyone have any issue, like concern about how to create an elevator speech or where to start, maybe? That's another way to do that if you don't want to share. So one question, while maybe someone will have the courage to do this, what are the best ways from your experience that helped you or others create rapport? For me, current events is always the best. You know, for in this situation, I would talk about the pandemics. Like, you know, if I was talking like, how are you and your family? You know, how are you dealing with the pandemic? Because it is those hot topics that it's okay to talk about. I wouldn't talk about the current events about the debate. You know, that's politics. So I wouldn't talk about that, even though that's current event. So for me, it's like, because for me, I have that sort of nurturing feeling, I guess, that nurturing quality about me as a counselor. For me, that seems natural to ask about someone's well-being with regards to the pandemic. So for me, find what's sort of natural for you and see if that's appropriate. And then if it's not, if you don't think so, then make it a little more appropriate. So that way it's a little more genuine, because then you believe what it is you're trying to say or ask about. Do you have one you can share with us? Oh, tell me about you. Is that what you mean, Alif? So if that's what you meant, like for me, if I was at like a formal networking event and it's more conducive to a 30 to 45 seconds, I would talk more about my professional background. I would say, oh, hi, how are you? My name is Marian. You know, I'll sort of jokingly say, I pronounce it Marian. Most people say Marian, but I'll say something like that so I feel like they would remember that. And we almost always, that's a way that people start to like, oh, wow, yeah, you're right. People do say Marian, something like that. So that's something I would start off with saying, you know, I would say I currently work at Baruch, talk mostly about my work. I'm also an adjunct professor at NYU, so I would talk about my work as an adjunct professor there. I would talk about all the other consulting jobs that I do, you know, if it was a more formal job. So I would focus on that type of work experience. And then, you know, transition to, I'm here because I want to learn more about whatever the topic is that's being presented, you know, and that I feel like that's really what motivated me. And then I would always ask a question at the end. I would say, how about you? You know, how did you end up here? I might ask a question like that, because then that means if I do that, that forces the other person to have to talk to me rather than an awkward silence, right? So that means I've given that person a cue to talk, and that makes it a little easier for me rather than I'm done talking, he or she's looking at me. I know that the conversation is going to keep going because I've asked a question. So that's a trick for me that I do for the Tell Me About You elevator pitch. If it's like a casual night, you know, cocktail-like event, it's very like, hi, my name is this. You know, I'll make a comment about the event, how great it is, things like that. So it depends on that. Like I went recently to an event. It's like a launch party. New York City is trying to be cybersecurity hub of the world. So they're launching a lot of different companies to run cybersecurity academies, I guess if you want to call them that, in New York City. So I've been attending them, and these are like 400 to 500 people events, and there's a lot of food involved and things like that. So I would go to those events and just introduce my name, really, and then, you know, you have name tags, so you say, oh, you're at so and so, I'm so and so. You know, there would be comments about those kind of things, and then we just kind of talk about the events, like, wow, you know, there's a lot of great information out here, you know, that they presented. I'm really interested in X, Y, and Z. So, and it also depends on when if this happened before or after the event, I'd tweak what I would say. So hopefully that gives you some idea, because it's all so situational. But just be mindful in the back of your mind or over your head. Just know you're never asking for a job, and never give that sense that you need a job yesterday. So does that answer your question, Alif? And I don't know if that answered your question, David, too. So please let me know. Otherwise, add more content to your comment. All right, I'll move on. These are just some of the things that we need to remember. The more genuine that you believe in what you're talking about, the more less awkward the way it is. So when you're networking, when you're ready to network, practice with people that you know. Sort of envision how the conversation is going to go. Don't just sort of show up and hope for the best. You definitely want to think about, okay, I'm going to meet John Doe at Starbucks, or I'm going to meet John Doe in a little bit through Zoom. You know, think about how it's all going to play out. So the more that you could sort of envision how the conversation, like I'm going to say this, he or she might say this, and then I'll say that. The more you can do that sort of role play and imagine what might be said, that's really a great practice to sort of envision how the conversation might go. That helps a lot. So that's one of the things that I added in the other slide is about envision. So it can happen via Zoom or in person, sort of figure out the flow and how it's going to go. So how can we get referral? When you say referral, what do you mean referral, Andres? So if you can just add more content to that question, that'd be great. Again, the last thing I said, relationship, rapport. That's the first goal of networking. And networking, unfortunately, takes time. It's not one of those like, I hope it works faster for you. There's no specific timeline. If you do this, it's going to speed you up, that kind of thing. So for me, that's why it's so important to be networking when you don't need it rather than when you need it, because it does take time to build relationship with someone. And once you build that relationship, then hopefully it'll be a little easier to ask for a referral internally for that company. But depends on the situation. So let me give you a story. So I used to manage the career services office in the Lincoln Center campus at Fordham University. And, you know, I was there for a few years and decided, you know what, I've always wanted to backpack through Europe. It's one of those things that I was going to do right after undergraduate and I never did. And then in graduate school, I was like, man, I'd love to just, you know, when I finished my grad school to do that, but I never did. So, you know, 10 years after grad school, I finally said, you know what, I'm going to do it before I have kids. I have 2 kids now. So I did it before my 2 kids. I said, I really want to do it. It's one of those bucket lists that I wanted to do. So I traveled for a year. Didn't backpack. I was at that age where roughing it might be rough. So I didn't quite backpack through Europe, but I did travel through Europe. I did 8 countries and it was great. And so I came back and decided it was time to work. You know, say, oh, maybe I should go back to work because you know, obviously money is not flowing everywhere. So I decided to work, and one of my old student that was my student when I was a career counselor at Pace University said, hey, I want to talk to you because I want to ask you about your opinion about grad school. And we had stayed in touch through LinkedIn. And so he wanted my opinion to whether grad school would be a good thing or not. So we met. And then he asked me like, well, what are you doing now? You know, I was like, well, you know, I got back from my trip and because we had emailed and he asked what I was doing. And I said, I guess I'm looking for a new job now, you know, and he asked me, well, what are you looking for? And I said, I think I'm going to stay away from higher ed and I'm going to try to do something in corporate. And then he's like, well, do you want to work here? I said, sure, I'd love to. You know, he's like, well, let me find someone that I can introduce you to. And then he's like, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd love to do something in diversity. So he introduced me to the diversity manager at the time. We had lunch, I met her, and then, you know, it went well. And she's like, well, what are you looking for now? And I said, you know, I just got back, but you know, as I told so our friend, I said, like, I'm really looking to do something in diversity because I really think blah, 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 all that stuff. And I said, well, you know, we're not looking for something here right now, but if there's something open up, would you want me to recommend you? Because that conversation organically happened in that direction. And I said, absolutely, I'd love to be recommended. And she's like, absolutely, I'd love, you know, I would do that. 2 weeks later, she calls me and says, do you want a job here? And I said, yes. And she said, I'm leaving my job. Would you like me to recommend you? And, you know, she did, and I got the job. And this was at Moody's Corporation, which is the credit rating company. And I was there and I loved it. So there's no like within a month, within a week that you'll get the referral. It's really about how fast you can build that connection with someone that will help make it easier to ask for something that you need. So I don't know if that makes any sense. You know, for example, like when I'm managing this tech program, I was looking for someone for a company that works in defense, like a defense tech company. And so I had to look for someone. I didn't know anyone. And I found someone, talked to them via Zoom, all Zoom, chatted, you know, and he's going to be hosting one of our interns. He's going to be doing a few presentations for the students. And that was a person I have no connection with whatsoever, but that's someone that, you know, I know that we could sort of work together and made sense, and he was happy to be on board. But because I was able to sort of talk to him about the program, you know, in a way that it made sense. And that's because I was able to build rapport with him. And that to me takes time. I've been doing this a lot longer, so I feel like it's a skill that needs to be nurtured, and it does take time. Hopefully that's a good example. So adding to the above question, how about if relationships are already established and be straightforward? Absolutely. If the relationships are already established, you know how the relationship is, and based on that, then you could decide whether it's time to ask. So there's really hard to say when it's time to ask. But if a relationship has been established, there's no reason why you can't be a little more forthcoming about your question or whatever it is that you need something about. Would you elaborate on follow through on follow-ups? I think like, I guess what I mean, I'm just trying to like, basically, if someone doesn't get back to you, follow up, meaning actually follow up. I didn't know if that's what you meant, but because a lot of times what people will do is like, well, they didn't get back to me. Maybe that's their way of saying they don't want to talk to me. Like a lot of people will say they don't want to do that. I always say do a 3-time follow-up. So follow up once, hopefully that's the thank you, right? You met, you the thank you, and then you follow up. And then if you do it again after another week, I always say give them 5 business days. For me, is a good rule of thumb, 5 business days. That doesn't include Saturday and Sunday. People get busy, especially nowadays. We don't know what's going on with people, you know? So following up is just, we don't, like for me, I have 2 kids. I will start an email and one of them will distract me. And next thing you know, I had forgot to send an email and I forgot to respond to that email because I got distracted that very second. So you don't know what is going on in their life. So for me, always follow up. So when I say follow through with your follow up, basically don't stop following up because you feel like you're being a burden to them. But I always say the rule of thumb is 3 times. After that, just give up and move on to the next one. That's my rule of thumb. So 3 times is the charm. 3rd time's the charm. Does that answer your question, Tracy? Okay. If it's not, let me do a follow-up. I'm happy to answer that. Just for time's sake, I just want to move on. You know, we've talked about this, but basically don't lie. You know, it is a stressful situation, networking, but it is something that's very useful. So don't sort of like, if it doesn't work out the way you think right away, don't give up. It is something that is a process. Most everyone will be cordial and respectful and get back to you, but there is a handful of people that might not. But I find that there's more people that will get back to you than not. So don't let that 1 or 2 sort of deter you from moving forward. So if you have one bad experience, don't be like, oh my God, this is horrible, I'm not going to do this again. You know, it's one situation, because I hear many more success stories than I do of, you know, obviously don't meet anyone in someone's apartment, you know, meet someone that you don't know in public where it's open and it's not scary, you know. Always, you know, try to talk to people over the phone first or email. Never share your private information. Never give any money to anybody. So, you know, be wise and be common sense in that sense, but never meet anyone's in someone's apartment. I don't care what excuse they give, you know. If it's like a WeWork or something like that, obviously that's public, that's okay, you know, things like that. But if it's like someone's apartment and they work there, let's say that they're a day trader or something like that, and they work from home, it's still not an appropriate place to have a meeting. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So these are, if you did your undergraduate degree at Baruch, you do. I don't know the full extent of the graduate program. We do have a graduate career services for Weissman. We do have graduate career services for Marx, and we have graduate career services for Zicklin. So those are 3 separate career services office. I don't know what they do. I mean, all the resources that they have for alumni, this is just all here are for undergraduate alumni who got their undergraduate degree at Baruch. So this is all free access. The mock interview module, this is a great resource because if interviewing or networking is sort of a stressful thing for you and you don't really know how you come off to people, this is a great place where you just need a webcam, you set it up, there is a pre-programmed interview questions, it records you, and it doesn't save on your drive, it just goes in the cloud, and then you could send that link to anyone you want, and then they could view the mock interview that you just did. So you can send it to a friend or a career counselor or someone that you trust that can give you real good feedback. And then you could, they can give you feedback that rather than taking up a video takes up so much data that it's sometimes it's painful to send to someone. So this is a great way to sort of have someone help you without taking up so much storage in their email. Focus 2 is a online self-assessment. Especially this is a useful tool for people who are looking to transition into something totally different. Like if you're going from like a marketing creative person to software engineering, something like that, but you don't know what to expect, Focus 2 has great resource on industry. So that you can get sort of like up-to-date information about certain occupations. And it's connected to the Department of Labor's data. So it's really includes the occupation you could think of. It's and also the other feature that it's connected to CUNY First at Baruch. So it's connected to all the majors that we have, undergrad and graduate at Baruch. And then if you click on that, like that actual major, it will give you like 50 different occupations that you could possibly do. That's not all of it, but those are 50 typical careers you can do with that major. So that's also useful tool for education around careers. Going Global is a resource more for people who want to work abroad. So if you're interviewing in Great Britain and you don't really know what the typical practice is for interviews and things there, that would be a great place to go to learn about customary things in certain countries. And vault.com, if you have your .edu email address, you can get Vault, like, anyone can go into Vault and get some basic information from, but for the paid handbooks that they have, the ones that they charge you for, you just need your Baruch email, and then you get free access to those handbooks that you normally have to pay for through Vault. And you have to go through Star Search. It's a special link. It's not vault.com. It's like the special Vault link that Baruch created so that they know it can recognize that, you went through Star Search. So those are 4 resources. For all undergraduate alumni, for graduate too, it's all free, but our one-on-one alumni appointment is free. All you have to, for now, we know that it's a challenge. A lot of people are going through some changes. So we made our alumni one-on-one appointments for free for now. And all you have to do is go into Star Search and click on Alumni Career Counseling. If you don't have a Star Search account, I'm going to put it in the email. Or, Greg is going to send it, but he's going to send the email about where in order to get a Star Search account, if you did your undergraduate, there's some information that we need. So you have to email career scdc@baruch.cuny.edu, I think is the email. But Greg will follow up with that email so that in case you don't have a Star Search account and you want access, just have to email that email and then we'll set you up. And then lastly, and I put this in my other slide. If you go to baruch.cuny.edu/careers, it'll bring you to our new page, because I haven't memorized that new page yet. If you click on the alumni, and Greg will send this out again, we do send out a weekly alumni listserv of opportunities that we're aware of that employers told us alumni is open to attending. So if you want to be part of that, it's, you just have to go, I'll give you the old website, which will direct you to the new website. And then click on alumni, and then like the first button that you see will be alumni newsletter. And if you want to receive that weekly newsletter, you have to click on that and fill in the form. And then we have tons of events, a lot of career fairs that we're aware of, on campus and off campus, that, you know, if alumni is available to attend it, we usually put it in there. So that is a great sort of list to be part of, so that if there's anything that we're aware of within the CUNY-verse, as well as New York City, we put it all in there. So that is if you're not part of that list, and that's open to anybody. So even if you did your graduate degree, or if, you know, you can definitely put that in there. Thank you, Greg, for doing that. There's the link there. But that is a great resource. So that's my presentation. I'm sorry that we went over a little bit. I'll stick around if anyone has any questions. If you want to just unmute yourself or put something in the chat, this is an opportunity for you to sort of ask me questions that you need to know about the topic that we talked about today. So.
Thank you, Marian.
Thank you, Greg.
And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and talk. And as Marian said, we'll send out an email afterwards with a lot of this information to make sure everybody knows how they can benefit from all these resources. And also, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Marian. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, so you can feel free to email me as well.
Yeah, let me put my, none of these were, oh yeah, let me put, this is the old slide, of course, I put it in, so. Oh, sorry, here's the email for, if you want a Star Search account, careerdcbaruch.cuny.edu. So here's in the chat. That's the, if you did your undergraduate degree at Baruch and you need a Star Search account, because you know, there are resources in there that are free, careerdc@baruch.cuny is the email to send it to.
Excellent. We will share the recording of this as well. So if you missed anything, you will be able to review this. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. Really appreciate everyone's engagement and participation. And thank you, Marian. Really appreciate those.
Happy to help. So I'll stick around. So otherwise, everyone enjoy their weekend. I'll stick around if anyone has any questions. I'm happy to stick around a little bit. So hopefully we didn't hold you up, Greg. It's late.
No, not at all.
Let me stop recording. I don't think anybody wants